Yasser Arafat, also known as Abu Ammar, was a Palestinian political leader. He was chairman of the Palestinian Liberation Organization from 1969 to 2004 and president of the Palestinian National Authority from 1994 to 2004. Ideologically an Arab nationalist, he was a founding member of the Fatah political party, which he led from 1959 until 2004. He was born on August 24, 1929 in Cairo, Egypt. His father, Abdurraouf al-Husseini, was a Palestinian textile merchant from Gaza City, while his mother, Zahwa Abu Saud, was from a family based in Jerusalem. Arafat was sent to live in Jerusalem with his uncle Salim Abu Saud in 1933 when his mother died from a kidney disease when he was 4 years old. His father brought him back to Cairo after 4 years in Jerusalem, where his older sister took care of him and his siblings. Arafat had a declining relationship with his father. He did not attend his father's funeral when he died in 1952, nor did he visit the grave of his father when he returned to Gaza. In 1944, he entered King Fuad University in Cairo and graduated in 1950. He became an Arab nationalist in 1944 and started smuggling arms into Palestine for use against Jews and British, the latter playing an administrative role in Palestinian territories. At the age of 19, during the Jewish-Arab War, Arafat left his studies at Fuad University to fight the Jews in Gaza. However, the Arabs' defeat and the creation of Israel left him so helpless. He attempted to reach Palestine to join Arab forces fighting against Israeli troops and the creation of the State of Israel. Nevertheless, Arafat fought alongside the Muslim Brotherhood instead of joining the ranks of the Palestinian Fedayeen, although he did not join the group. Unfortunately, the war went down in favor of Israel in early 1949 and Arafat returned to Cairo because of the lack of the support. After returning to the university, he studied civil engineering and from 1952 to 1956 he served as chairman of the General Union of Palestinian Students. Arafat was commissioned to join the Egyptian army and served on behalf of Egypt during the Suez Crisis in October 1956. Arafat went to Kuwait after Suez Crisis, where he worked as an engineer and founded his own contracting company. He founded Fatah in 1959, an underground network in support of armed resistance to Israel, with his partners such as Khalil al-Wazir, Salah Khalaf, and Khalid al-Hassan. For Arafat, the year 1964 marked the establishment of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, which put together a number of associations working towards a free Palestinian state. The Six-Day War began on June 5, 1967, when Israel launched airstrikes on Egypt's Air Force. The war ended in an Arab defeat and several Arab territories, including the West Bank and Gaza Strip, were occupied by Israel. Arafat continued to develop the Palestinian Liberation Organization and move operations to Jordan. Nevertheless, ultimately expelled by King Hussein, Arafat moved the Palestinian Liberation Organization to Lebanon, and bombings, shootings, and assassinations carried out by the Palestinian Liberation Organization against Israel were common events. In the early 1980s, the Palestinian Liberation Organization was forced out of Lebanon, and shortly after Arafat launched the protest movement Intifada against Israel's occupation of the West Bank and Gaza Strip. In Israeli retribution, the Intifada was characterized by constant violence on the streets. The Arabic word Intifada is literally translated as tremor. However, it is defined as revolt. After an incident at the Erez checkpoint that killed 4 Palestinian inhabitants of the Jabalia refugee camp in a traffic accident involving an Israeli car, the initial stage of the Intifada began. There was a hidden process of talks between the PLO and Israeli officials in Oslo, which began in January 1993, establishing an agreement known as the Oslo Accords. Arafat and Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin interchanged letters in September 1993 in which Arafat, as chairman of the PLO, officially recognized the right of the State of Israel to live in peace and security, while Rabin accepted the PLO as the voice of the Palestinian people and made clear the intention of Israel to start negotiations with the entity. In Washington, D.C., Arafat, Rabin, and the United States President Bill Clinton signed the Statement of Concepts on Palestinian Self-Rule on September 13, 1993. The agreement between Israel and the PLO, also known as Oslo, contemplated the eventual introduction of Palestinian self-government in the West Bank and Gaza Strip for a provisional period not exceeding 5 years, leading to an enduring settlement based on UN Security Council Resolutions 242 and 338. A few months later, in September 1995, Rabin, Arafat, and Israeli Foreign Minister Shimon Peres, both newly named Nobel Peace Prize winners, signed the temporary agreement on the West Bank and Gaza Strip. On 20 January 1996, Arafat was elected president of the Palestinian Authority to govern the Palestinian population in the occupied territories. Arafat won 88% of the votes. Connections between Rabin remained pleasant, although sometimes they had issues, especially on the critical matter of the ongoing settlement activity of Israel. However, with Rabin's assassination in November 1995 by a Jewish radical and the election of Benjamin Netanyahu as the prime minister, who was an opponent of the Oslo Accords, ties were strained. Negotiations were blocked even after Clinton's involvement, who scheduled a 1998 summit meeting with the two leaders at the Y Plantation in eastern Maryland. Clinton held a Camp David summit in northern Maryland in July 2000, where the landmark Camp David Treaty between Israel and Egypt was signed in 1978. The objective was to find a firm agreement after 5 years of Palestinian self-rule to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the issue of the freedom of Palestinian refugees to return, ownership of Jerusalem boundaries, and Jewish developments in the West Bank and Gaza quarter was addressed for its first time, and it was doubtful that these delicate and complicated concerns would be solved quickly. At the outset, Arafat was distrustful of the meeting and its timing, and although some progress had been made, there was almost no final settlement at the end. Arafat lost most of his political prestige when the President George Washington Bush launched the War on Terror in November 2000, following the attacks on the World Trade Center in New York City on September 11 and the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. Many observers suggest that his political survival was mainly due to Israel's concern that if Israel assassinated him or even imprisoned him, he might become a martyr for the Palestinian cause. Israel tried to assassinate Arafat on several instances, but never used its own agents, attempting instead to shift Palestinians close to the target, often using blackmail. The Israeli Mossad and the military police made 2 attempts on Arafat's life in 1970. Abu Saeed, a Palestinian undercover agent for the Mossad, was involved in a scheme in 1976 to insert poison in the food of Arafat, which looked like grains of rice. Upon getting the order to go ahead, Abu Saeed admitted that he couldn't go through the scheme because he was first of all a Palestinian and his conscience wouldn't let him to do it. In an interview with Time during 1988, Arafat said that due to his fear of Israel's assassination, he never slept 2 nights in a row in the same place. During Israel's 1982 intervention of Lebanon, Israeli Defense Minister Ariel Sharon developed a special task force codenamed Saltfish, guided by specialists Meir Dagan and Rafi Eaton to monitor Arafat's activities in Lebanon to execute him because Sharon considered Arafat as a Jew murderer and a significant icon. The task force of Saltfish coordinated the bombings of buildings where it was suspected that Arafat and senior PLO leaders were resting. After vomiting during a staff meeting, the very first claims of Arafat's deteriorating health by his doctors for what his spokesman said was the flu came on October 25, 2004. In the subsequent days, his condition worsened. On a French government plane, Arafat was transported to France and brought to the Percy Military Hospital in Clamart, a suburb of Paris. He had slipped into a slowly deepening coma on November 3. On 11 November 2004, Arafat was declared dead at the age of 75 of what French clinicians named a gigantic hemorrhagic stroke. French physicians also said that Arafat injured from a blood condition known as intravascular coagulation. Israel declined to bury Arafat near Al-Aqsa Mosque or anywhere in Jerusalem, raising security concerns. Israel also feared that its burial would enhance Palestinian demands to East Jerusalem. There have been various hypotheses about the death of Arafat, the most prevalent being poisoned. Ashraf al-Kurdi, Arafat's personal doctor, reported that Arafat had been poisoned, probably by thallium. On 27 November 2012, three teams of foreign investigators, a French, a Swiss, and a Russian team, obtained samples from the corpse of Arafat and the surrounding soil in the Ramallah tomb to launch an independent investigation. On 6 November 2013, the Swiss forensic team discovered polonium levels in the ribs and pelvis of Arafat 18 to 36 times the standard. According to the Swiss expert team, death by polonium poisoning is about 5 on a probability scale ranging from 1 to 6. A team of Russian experts published a report on 26 December 2013 saying they had found no evidence of radioactive poisoning. A French prosecuting attorney closed a French investigation in March 2015, declaring that French experts had determined the death of Arafat was of natural causes and that the traces of polonium and lead found were environmental.